My name is Claire Morgan. I believed family meant showing up no matter what it cost. I was 40 years old and had spent 15 years building a career in corporate restructuring. I was good at finding the decisions that pushed troubled companies toward disaster. I could separate emotion from facts and make hard choices when everyone else was afraid. Yet when it came to my own family, I had always been different. My husband Daniel knew that better than anyone. He watched me answer calls from my parents during dinner and send money whenever they said something had gone wrong. He reminded me that helping people was good, but disappearing inside their problems was not. Our 4-year-old son Lucas had been sick for 2 days. His fever had finally started coming down, but he was still weak and sleepy. That morning, I had my final interview for a senior position that could change everything. It was the opportunity I had worked toward. I needed only 3 hours. I called my mother, Evelyn, because I believed she would understand. She answered quickly and asked about Lucas. I told her his fever was improving. Then I explained about the interview and asked if she could stay with him while Daniel and I handled everything. There was a long pause, then she said she had plans. My father Robert had golf. She had lunch plans. I reminded her that I needed 3 hours. Her voice became impatient. "We are not your nannies, Claire." I looked across the room at Lucas sleeping beneath a blue blanket. Something inside me went completely still. I had been their safety net. 5 years earlier, they had been struggling with a mortgage they could barely manage. I had used my savings and a large work bonus to pay $240,000 on their house. Later, I bought them a $45,000 car. I also sent them $3,000 every month. I never called those things sacrifices. I called them family. Now 3 hours was somehow too much. My mother continued talking about how Daniel and I needed a better childcare plan. She said we should solve our own problems. I listened quietly, then I said something that surprised me. "You are right." She became silent. "You are not my nanny." I paused and looked at the money transfer on my laptop, and I am not your bank. The silence felt different. My mother finally asked what I meant. I told her I would review the monthly support I had been sending. Her voice changed immediately. "Claire, wait," but I ended the call. Minutes later, my phone began ringing. First my mother, then my father, then my younger sister, Tessa. That was when I realized something was seriously wrong. They were not afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing the money, and I had no idea yet how much they had been hiding from me all along. By noon, my phone showed 7 missed calls. 3 were from my mother, Evelyn. 2 were from my father, Robert. 2 came from my sister, Tessa. I ignored everyone. Instead, I contacted a professional caregiver service and explained that my son needed someone experienced while I attended an important interview. They found a retired pediatric nurse named Mrs. Carter. She arrived Tuesday morning with a gentle smile. Lucas watched her from the couch, then he lifted his toy fire truck and asked if she knew how emergency sirens worked. Mrs. Carter smiled. "I think you will have to teach me." Lucas laughed. Since my mother's phone call, I felt my shoulders relax. I thanked Mrs. Carter and left for the interview. The conference room was surrounded by glass walls. 6 executives sat across from me. They asked about failed negotiations, difficult clients, financial crises, and people who refused reasonable solutions. Usually I answered from professional experience. That morning I answered them differently. I told them strong leadership required boundaries. Emotions could be acknowledged without allowing them to control decisions. People sometimes panic when consequences arrive, but panic does not change facts. One interviewer leaned forward. "What do you do when someone becomes angry because you refuse to solve their problem?" I answered calmly. "I let them own the consequence." The room fell quiet. Another interviewer smiled. When the interview ended, I walked outside into the cold Boston air. For the first time in days, I felt calm. I had solved the childcare problem. I had shown up for myself. Nobody knew I had nearly missed the opportunity because my mother would not give me 3 hours. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer I trusted at a quiet cafe downtown. I told him everything: the mortgage, the car, the monthly transfers. He listened without interrupting. He explained that the house and car were gifts already completed. The monthly $3,000 was voluntary. I could continue it or stop it. Before deciding, he suggested examining where the money was going. That night after Lucas fell asleep, I opened my banking records. At first, everything looked ordinary: groceries, utilities. Then I noticed a recurring trans fee, $1,500 every month. The recipient was Tessa. I stared at the screen. I checked 6 months. Then 1 month, then 2 years. They continued. My hands became coal. For 2 years, my parents received my $3,000 every month. Half went quietly to my 35-year-old sister. I calculated the total. $36,000. I covered my mouth. My mother had told me they needed help for retirement. She never told me half that money supported Tessa. The childcare insult suddenly felt smaller. This was about 2 years of deception. I closed the records, then I made one decision: the next transfer would not arrive. When my mother called, I would ask the question she had avoided: how much of my support was used for my parents? The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Lucas was still asleep, and Daniel stood near the kitchen window watching the rain. I told him what I had discovered. He looked at the records and slowly shook his head. $36,000, he said. I nodded. I felt embarrassed, even though I had done nothing wrong. Daniel reached for my hand. You trusted them, Claire. That was not a crime. His words helped, but I still felt used. At 8:12, I called my mother. She answered immediately. Claire, thank goodness. I wanted to ask about the money I send every month. There was a pause. What about it? Have you been giving part of it to Tessa? My mother became quiet. Then she said she had needed help sometimes. Sometimes I looked at the records beside me. It was $1,500 every month for 2 years. That is $36,000. She sighed. Tessa was struggling. She has bills, so do I. My mother sounded offended. You have a good career and a comfortable life. I stared at the kitchen wall. That did not answer my question. Did you tell me where my money was going? No, why? Because you would have made a big issue about it. I almost laughed. You mean I would have asked? She said. Tessa was family, and family helped each other. I remembered those words. Family. That word appeared when they needed something. I asked if Tessa knew the money came from me. My mother hesitate. My stomach tightened. So Steiten, my mother changed the subject. Your father and I still need the monthly support. I closed my eye. She did not ask about Lukey. She did not apologize. Her first concern was the next payment. I told her I was stopping the $3,000. She became furious. You cannot do that without warning. I reminded her that I had been sending it voluntarily. She said they had planned their retirement around it. I answered that I had never agreed to finance everyone forever. Then she said something that stayed with me. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay you. I looked toward Lucas Rue. I thought about every payment and every emergent crow. I had given because I loved them. Now they were describing my generosity as a debt. I told my mother I was not taking back the house or car. I was simply ending the monthly support. She began crying. Claire, please do not punish us because of Tessa. That sentence revealed more than anything else. She knew exactly what she had done. I ended the call. For the first time, I did not feel cruel. I felt clear. The monthly transfer was scheduled for Friday. I would let it stop. I wanted to see what happened when my family finally had to live without the safety net I had built. Deep down, I already knew the calls would come. Friday morning arrived quietly. At 8:12, the monthly transfer that had left my account for years was supposed to go through. It did not. I watched the banking screen and felt strangely calm. At 8:19, my mother's name appeared on my phone. I let it ring. She called again, then my father, then my mother again. At 9, the messages started. Claire, something is wrong with the account. Please call me. We need to talk. I stared at those words. Not one message asked how Lucas was feeling. Not one asked whether my interview had gone well. The only emergency was money, I finally answered. Nothing is wrong. I stopped the monthly support. Her response arrived immediately. You cannot just do that. I typed slowly. I can stop giving away my own money. Then I put the phone down. That Sunday, my parents arrived at our house. Daniel sat beside me in the living room. Lucas was upstairs playing with his cars. I had prepared copies of every payment. My mother sat across from me. This has gone too far. I looked at her. No, Mom. It has gone on long enough. My father rubbed his hands together. We know you are upset. I interrupted him. Are you sorry? Neither answers, or I picked up the payment summary. Did you use my money to pay Tessa Wren? My mother crossed her arms. We helped her. How much she looked toward my father, he lowered his eyes. I already know. $36,000. My mother's face became pale. Tessa needed us. I swallowed hard. She needed you. And I apparently only needed to keep paying. My father finally spoke. Claire, that was not fair. I looked at him. What was not fair? Paying for your house, buying your car, sending you $3,000 every month, or asking for 3 hours with my sick son. Silence filled the room. My mother started crying. We never wanted you to feel used. I believed her for 1 second. Then I remembered the money. You may not have wanted me to feel used, but you made sure I was useful. My father looked ashamed. My mother whispered that Tessa was our daughter. I answered quietly. So am I. Those 4 words changed the room. For years, I had accepted being the responsible daughter, the dependable daughter, the daughter who could handle everything. I finally understood that being capable had become permission for everyone else to ask for more. I stood and placed the papers on the table. I am not taking your house. I am not taking your car. I am not demanding repayment. But the $3,000 ends here. My father looked at me. What happens if we need help? I answered honestly. Tell me what happened. I will decide whether I can help. That was the first boundary I had ever given them, and I knew it would not be the last I would decide without guilt. Before anyone could answer, the doorbell rang. My mother looked nervous. I already knew who it was. Tessa walked inside without waiting to be invited. Her face was red. What did you do? She demanded. I stood slowly. Tessa, this is a conversation between my parents and me. She looked at Mom. You said she would calm down. My mother closed her eyes. That sentence told me everything. Tessa turned toward me. My rent is due next week. I said nothing. She stepped closer. You cannot just stop the money. I looked at her carefully. Why not? Because you have always helped us. There it was again. Not gratitude, expectation. I told her the money had never belonged to her. She laughed bitterly. You have more than enough. That sentence was almost identical to what my mother had said. Nobody had asked whether I was tired. They had simply looked at what I had and decided it was available. Tessa crossed her arms. This is all because Mom would not babysit one sick child. I shook my head. No. That was when I finally understood the pattern. For years, I had solved everyone's problems. When my parents struggled with their mortgage, I paid it. When they needed a car, I bought one. When their monthly income felt uncomfortable, I sent money. When Tessa needed help, my money quietly followed her. And when my son was sick and I needed 3 hours, my mother told me she was not my nanny. Tessa looked at Mom. You told me she would never actually cut us off. My mother began crying. I felt only sadness, my father whispered. Tessa, enough. But Tessa looked at me with anger. You think you are better than us? No, I think I'm responsible for my household, and you are responsible for yours. She shook her head. Then who is going to help me? I answered calmly. You are going to help yourself. Nobody rescued her. My mother reached for her hand. I stopped her with a gentle look. Please do not make this another emergency I have to solve. The room became quiet. Then I opened the front door. Tessa walked out first, my mother followed. My father stayed behind for a moment. He looked at me with tired eyes. I hope you know what you are doing. I looked toward the stairs where Lucas was playing. For the first time, I did. He nodded and left. When the door closed, my hands began shaking. Daniel put his hand over mine. You did the right thing. I looked at the closed door, but boundaries felt strange when you had spent your entire life believing that love meant giving more. That night I checked my phone again. There were no new messages. For once, the silence did not frighten me. And inside that space, I finally began thinking about my own future. Not my parents' future, not Tessa's future, mine. That night, I slept peacefully. The following week felt strangely empty. For years, my phone had been a constant source of emergencies. My mother called about repairs. My father called about bills. Tessa called whenever something went wrong. Now the phone stayed quiet. At first, I kept checking it. I would unlock the screen during breakfast and expect another demand. Nothing, Daniel noticed. You keep looking at your phone. He smiled. I'm getting used to not being needed. He shook his head. You are still needed here. He pointed toward Lucas. Our son was sitting at the table drawing a dinosaur with enormous green wings. I watched him and realized how much of his childhood I had spent worrying about others. 2 days later, the company called. The woman from my interview asked if I had time for a conversation. My heart started racing. She told me they had discussed my experience and leadership skills. Then she said the words I had hoped to hear. We would like to offer you the partnership. For a moment, I could not speak. 15 years of work had led to that sentence. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I stood in the kitchen with tears in my eyes. Daniel walked in. He knew immediately. You got it. I nodded. He hugged me. Lucas ran into the room and asked why we were hugging. I lifted him into my arms because Mommy got good news. That evening, Daniel bought takeout. He also found a small grocery store cake with congratulations written across the top. Lucas ate most of the frosting. We laughed until he got hiccups. The celebration was simple, but it meant more than any expensive dinner. I had spent years believing success meant protecting everyone. Now I understood success also meant protecting my time, my peace, and my family. A week later, my mother finally sent a message. She did not ask for money. She wrote, I know you are angry. I did not answer immediately. Then another message arrived. I'm sorry about Tuesday. I stared at those words. It was the first apology she had offered, but I was not ready to pretend everything was fixed. I replied, Thank you for saying that. We can talk when things are calmer. She answered, I understand. That exchange felt different. There was no demand, no guilt, no mention of money. Just 2 sentences between a mother and daughter who had finally reached a place where pretending was no longer possible. That night, I opened my laptop. The partnership papers were waiting. I signed them carefully. Then I closed the computer. Lucas was asleep upstairs. Daniel was reading beside me. For the first time, I was not planning how to rescue anyone. I was simply enjoying the life I had worked so hard to build. And I knew the hardest part was still ahead. I had stopped the money, but I had not yet decided whether my family could become something healthier without it. 6 weeks after the confrontation, a letter arrived from my father. It was handwritten. I almost placed it aside. Then I saw the first line. Claire, I am not writing to ask you for anything. I sat at the kitchen table and began reading. My father admitted that he had been a coward. He said he had allowed my mother to protect Tessa because challenging her was easier than dealing with another family conflict. He admitted something else. He had watched me carry the financial responsibility for years because I always seemed strong enough to handle it. Then I reached one sentence that made me stop. I mistook your strength for an absence of need. I read it 3 times. That was the apology I had wanted for years without realizing it. My father finally understood that being capable did not mean I never needed help. I did not call him that day. I was not ready, but I kept the letter. Months passed. My parents adjusted to their new reality. They still had their house. They still had the car I had given them. They still had retirement income and Social Security, but they no longer had my automatic $3,000 every month. Dad played less golf. Mom cooked more often instead of ordering dinner. They made choices based on what they actually had, and nothing terrible happened. Tessa struggled at first. Without the monthly $1,500, she had to take more styling work and accept another job at a home decor store. Eventually, she moved into a smaller apartment with a roommate. She survived. That mattered to me. I had spent years believing that saying no would destroy people. Instead, it forced them to discover what they could do themselves. 6 months later, Daniel, Lucas, and I went to the park on a Sunday afternoon. Lucas was laughing as he ran toward the swings. My phone buzzed. It was my father. He had sent a picture of my mother standing beside a rose garden. She looked older, but peaceful. His message said only, How is Lucas? I smiled. I sent him a picture of Lucas laughing. A few seconds later, his reply appeared. We miss him. I looked at Daniel. Maybe someday, I said. Maybe we can meet them halfway. Daniel nodded. I was not ready to forget everything. I was not pretending the past had disappeared, but I finally understood that forgiveness did not require surrendering my boundaries. I used to believe loving my family meant being available. Every time they needed something, I thought love meant paying the difference, fixing every crisis, protecting everyone from consequences. I was wrong. Love without boundaries can become expectation. Expectation can become entitlement. And entitlement can make people forget. There is a human being on the other side of every favor. I did not destroy my family. I stopped destroying myself to keep everyone else comfortable. That Tuesday taught me something I will never forget. Sometimes the hardest word you can say to family is no. And sometimes that one word is the beginning of finally choosing yourself. If you have ever been the person everyone depends on, tell me your story in the comments. And if this story touched you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Because sometimes setting a boundary does not end love. It teaches people how to love you without using you.